This is the MM300 case from NamokiMods. And unlike the MM300 conversion case that you may have seen before, this one not only supports SKX007 parts, but it uses a regular screw-down caseback. So today's build is kind of a special one because these builds aren't exactly cheap when you tally up all the parts, and given the amount of builds that I've done over the last year and a half, I wasn't going to do any more full builds for a while. But then I saw this newsletter from NamokiMods in my emails showing that this year they'd launched an MM300 case that was not only compatible with SKX007 parts, but uses a regular caseback. So I was very eager to try it out and show it off here on the channel. I emailed NamokiMods and asked them if they'd be willing to send me some case parts to review in a video, and they said yes, and I don't have to send them back or anything. This was actually quite a pleasant surprise because given how small this channel currently is, I was expecting thanks but no thanks. So in the interest of transparency here, this build is a collaboration with NamokiMods. And because they were generous enough to send these parts, I get to do a build in this case, and I get to bring you along for the journey. And of course, although I've received some of the parts for this build for free, this isn't a paid review or sponsorship or anything like that, so I will be giving my honest opinions on any of the parts used in this build. Also, if you do want to buy any of the NamokiMods parts used in this build here, I've got some affiliate links in the video description, as well as a link to the NamokiMods store. So if you do end up buying anything from their store through those affiliate links, I'll just get a small percentage of the sale at no extra cost to you. It's just a nice way to support the channel and it doesn't cost anything extra. So that's enough of the preamble. Let's get these parts on the table and have a look at them, shall we? So on this side are the parts that NamokiMods have sent me, and over here are the parts that I've put together for this build. So why don't we start with the case? That's the star of the show, this MM300 case that, unlike the conversion case where everything loads in from the front, this one's designed to use a regular screw-down caseback. And of course, like the conversion case, it's compatible with SKX007 parts. You won't be putting your SKX bracelets on this because it's a 20mm lug width, but NamokiMods have a Jubilee and a regular Oyster-style bracelet for this, and I will show off the Oyster-style bracelet for this later on in the video. I just think this is a great idea, having the compatibility for SKX007 parts, but the stylings of an MM300 case. Next, we've got the MM300 Bezel, which I thought would be a nice choice for this case. That's kind of like a coin edge, but with wider spacing between the grooves. Then next, we've got what makes this case so cool, just a regular SKX007 display case back here that will fit this case. Then we've got a nice polished coin edge signed S crown, and it's got those nice double gaskets on there for that water resistance, which I always appreciate. Next, we've got a piece of flat sapphire crystal with clear AR coating, and this one's got just a slight bevel around the edge. Then here we've just got your standard gasket set and the click spring for the bezel. Now this is a chapter ring they sent when I had a different dial in mind for this build, so I won't be using it for this one, but I thought I'd show it off anyway because it is a fantastic chapter ring with nice rounded markers and excellent lume. So over here we've got the parts that I've put together for this case, starting with the dial. This is the SBDC101 dial, the new 62 mass. I wanted to use the SBDC051 dial, the 2017 version, but I just couldn't get hold of one, so this is a nice substitute. Now for the hands, I picked up some of NamokiMods' recently released 62 mass style hands, and the lume matches the dial perfectly, which is wonderful. Next, the bezel insert. Now this was an important one. I wanted one that looked like the MM200 SPB185 insert, and I wanted it with good lume at a good price, and I found this on AliExpress for 15 quid, so that was fantastic. Now, the chapter ring. Because I had to swap out the dial for one with minute markers on the dial, I needed just a plain brush chapter ring, and this one is from Crystal Times. And then here, of course, I've got some adhesive rings for the bezel insert. And then for the movement, I've got an NH36 that I'll be using without the day complication, essentially turning it into an NH35. Then in here, I've got a couple of straps that I might show, a nice black and silver NATO and a brown leather strap. Now, the brown leather strap I don't have the right spring bars for, but I might try to show that on there later. But until then, I say let's get into this build. So thanks again to NamokiMods for sending these case parts. Let's get on with it and put this watch together. So I'll start with putting the case together, which means giving the chapter ring and the case a quick clean, ready for the crystal to be pressed on. Now, as always, because I use a die smaller than the diameter of the crystal so I can see it going in, it was pushing the crystal down at an angle, so I had to use the edge piece there to press against the case and another piece on the inside of the crystal to push the glass up and out. And after 7 attempts with those smaller dies, I decided to just use a much bigger one to get better even coverage, and the crystal went in flat first try. With that done, I can take the gasket out of the bezel, lubricate it, and put it back in. There are spares in the packets, but it's better to use the one that comes in the bezel. I find that one's ever so slightly thicker than the spares they give you. So after that's lubricated, we can pop the bezel on. So next, when checking the fitment of the bezel insert, I noticed a problem. The inner diameter simply isn't wide enough to accommodate the crystal that I'm using. Perhaps if I'd used a different piece of sapphire crystal with more of a bevel on the edge, that might have fit, but since it will not fit in there, I've no choice but to sand it down. You see, this is a bezel insert that I got from Crystal Times, and it fits in there perfectly. And if I want to make the one that I got from AliExpress, which I really prefer the style of, to fit, I'm going to have to sand this down. So this is a bit that I will put on a drill, because my Dremel is unfortunately broken, and I'm just going to run it along the inside here for an extraneous amount of time until it is the correct diameter to fit. So I'll see you in about 2 hours. And no, I'm not joking, this took 2 hours of sanding and testing to get it to fit. Anyway, let's get the day complication off this NH36, ready for the dial. Of course, I'm using a 3.8 o'clock crown case, and this dial has 3 o'clock crown feet, so let's get them off, ready for the dial dots. I was hoping that I'd gotten a nice clean break with those dial feet, but unfortunately not. The dial was raised up a bit, so I had to take it off and file these down. Still, slightly out of sequence. Let's show me putting on the dial dots. The good news here is, because I'm using a chapter ring that's just brushed and it doesn't have any markers on it, I don't have to align the dial flawlessly. And you know what, since we've got it in here, let's have a quick look and see what the insert's going to look like. You'll see that I filed it down nicely so it does fit, but my hand slipped and I scratched the 50, so although it kind of looks fine in most lights, I have got another one on order to replace it with to fix that blunder. I had a strange problem here that I've never encountered before, where the second hand just wouldn't move unless I gave it a slight tap. I thought maybe there was something wrong with the little pin that it sits on. As you can see, look, just a bit of pressure and suddenly it stops moving, but then you can give it a tap and then it'll start moving again. I haven't had any issues since I've put the watch together, so I assume that it's just a slight problem with this NH36 that doesn't seem to be anything immediately worrying. But see that? You can see that. I don't understand it, but still, it works for the time being, and the spacing for the hands is fairly decent, although it seems that I've inadvertently bent that second hand slightly, but I can live with it for the time being. Now, let's get it cased up, shall we? Oh, before I get ahead of myself, I better size up the stem, so I've got another one here for comparison just to give me an idea of where to start trimming it. If it needs more taken off, I'll file it down on the diamond file, and then I can glue the crown on with some 2-part epoxy. So before I put the bracelet on, I just wanted to show off the case here now that it's fully assembled, just to show off those lines of the MM300 case. It's such a good looking case. I'm so pleased that they've come out with this because it means that you can mod it like a normal SKX, but you have the style of the MM300, which I've always been eager to get hold of one of these. And an MM300 is an expensive SEIKO, and this is the same price as the other SKX case mods, so it's like a premium thing for a much more affordable price. I mean, these parts look similar to a watch from SEIKO that you would pay well over £1,000 for, and this was significantly cheaper than that. I'm just gutted that I scratched the 50 on the bezel insert there, as you can see it in the light. I will be very pleased when I get the new one in there, because I did try to polish that off with a polishing cloth, but it's such a deep scratch. Look at it. One slip of the hand is all it takes to screw it up, but still, let's have a look at that bezel. Out of all the NamokiMods cases that I've got 3 of them now. This bezel action is the nicest of the 3. That is really nice and smooth. This one comes in second place to the LX bezel on my Atlantis build. Anyway, let's get the bracelet on here. I've been eager to receive the bracelet, as NamokiMods just released these bracelets as of making this video. Literally as soon as it was available on the store, I bought one. So here it is, finally, the finished build. I always get to the end of this process and I feel like it's taken ages to get here, what with ordering parts and waiting for them to come in, and then something goes wrong and then you've got to wait for the replacements to come in. It's what a palaver. But we're here. Here it is, the MM300 62 mass MM200 hybrid thing. Anyway, I think it's absolutely stunning. Why don't we... So first of all, the bezel action is really nice. It doesn't have that ratchety feel. I've got a few cases from NamokiMods, like this, my Meteorite build here. And if you listen to the bezel action on this one, it's got that sort of ratchety... The click is a lot heavier and louder. Whereas when you compare it to the MM300, can you hear that? It's a much smoother rotation on this bezel compared to the ones on my other Namoki cases, so there's a plus for that one. The fitment of all the parts is great. The caseback, the crown, the crystal, the chapter ring, everything just fits as you would expect it to, which I've pretty much come to expect from NamokiMods parts now. They all just go together the way they should. The finishing on the case is also fantastic. It sits comfortably on the wrist. There's no sharp edges, but there's still definition between the textures, you know, the polished and brushed surfaces. Considering that it's quite a large case, the lug tip to lug tip is 48mm or 47 point something, but we'll round it up to 48. It actually sits quite comfortably on my 6-inch wrist, especially with the articulation of the bracelet as well. It doesn't feel too large for my wrist, and so, you know, for those of you out there that have a small wrist and you're worried, is this big chunky watch gonna not fit so well or not be so comfortable on wrist, I can say that it is very comfortable to wear. Of course, it looks fantastic. It really does capture the MM300 style perfectly. And I can't argue with the price either. This case is listed at £66 on their website, which is the same price as most of their other cases in the SKX007 range. So what about the bracelet? Because this is a custom bracelet that NamokiMods made especially for this case. Of course, it's your standard oyster style 3-link bracelet. Tapers down from 20mm lugs to 16mm, and it has an 18mm clasp. So the bracelet itself fits perfectly to the watch. The end lugs have absolutely no play in them. They were designed to fit this case, and they do it absolutely perfectly. They've also got a Jubilee version, but I don't have one of those on hand, so I can't speak to the quality or what it looks like. But this version has quite a nice brushed finish on it as well. Has a nice bit of subtle definition in the direction of the brushing. As mentioned before, decent articulation on the end lugs. It wraps around my 6-inch wrist quite nicely and it fits very comfortably. I have got a couple of problems with it though. It feels a bit less robust than, say, the strap code bracelets that I've got on my other watches, or even the Heimdallr bracelet just feels much more robust and heavy compared to this. And the screws, the sort of pins, they're the same as you would find on a strap code bracelet. They are the same, except just a bit less substantial. They're smaller than the strap code screws. I also think they could have refined the middle part of the end lugs a bit better. It almost blends into the two side pieces. If you compare it to the strap code bracelets again, this middle piece here actually has defined sides with a crisp edge, not sharp, but definitely crisp, whereas this almost blends in, and I think it's just a bit too soft. And given that this bracelet is designed specifically for this case, and if you look at the side of it, you can see there's plenty of room to just raise up the height of that middle part of the end lug. I would like to see more definition on that in perhaps future variations of the bracelet, or just, you know, a new batch. That being said, I think this is still a pretty decent bracelet, but given that it tapers down and so that technically there's less metal, I would say it feels more like a bracelet that's worth maybe 45 quid rather than 53 quid. If you think these Miltat strap code bracelets go on Amazon for £55, and it's a bit more of a substantial bracelet, especially with what I mentioned about the screws being a bit chunkier and such. So I would say it's just maybe priced slightly too high, but that's just my thoughts on it. I think that it's still a pretty darn good bracelet, and of course, like I say, it's a perfect fit. Wears comfortably. So there you go, those are my thoughts on NamokiMods MM300 case and the accompanying bracelet. To summarise, I think it's a fantastic case, and despite the issues I had when building, which were undoubtedly caused by me, this case was great to build in. You get a nice, robust quality feel from a build with this case, and every NamokiMods case that I've had thus far has been no exception. Shame that the bracelet doesn't feel quite as substantial as a strap code, considering it's within that same price range, but it's almost there, and it's a shame about the definition on the end lugs as well. It would have been nice if they just had a sort of crisp separation between that middle section compared to the outer two sections, but I still think it's a really nice bracelet, and as somebody who prefers bracelets on their watches, this was a welcome thing, especially since it was made specifically for this case, so it just eliminates the headache of finding out if there are any aftermarket options that might fit this case. And I know there are, but you know, it's still a bit of a headache getting hold of them and trying them, and if they don't fit, it's just nice to know that NamokiMods have one specifically for this case, so you can just order one along with the case should you choose to build a watch in it. Now, that being said, I know that there are those of you out there that enjoy straps on your watches, so here's the build on a lovely 20mm brown leather strap, which I think looks actually really nice on this case. Fits very nicely as well, nice and comfortable. And here it is on a 20mm black and grey NATO strap. NATOs are not my favourite, and I think maybe this colour combination wasn't quite right. Maybe just a charcoal grey or a plain black NATO would have worked here, but still, you get the idea. And of course, it wears well on a NATO, nice and comfortable, decent articulation for even a small wrist. What about the build process itself? Did I have any other problems that I didn't show yet in the video? Yes, I did. It seems like I'm always met with a new problem with every single build that I do, and this build is no exception. This time, during the several attempts at trying to get the crystal in nice and level, I decided to put the bezel on to have a look and see if it lined up, and when I saw that it didn't line up, I went to pop off the bezel and it happened just fine, and I did this a few times, and then whilst trying to very gently pry the bezel off, and I wasn't even doing any sort of prying action, I was just taking the bezel tool and sort of putting it in the gap around the bezel to very gently remove it. I then look at the crystal and there's a massive chip out of the glass. You can imagine that I was pretty pissed off since this was a collaboration with NamokiMods and I really needed everything to go well for this, and of course encountering a brand new problem that involves needing to get a part replaced is not something you need when doing a collaboration where you just received a bunch of parts. But fortunately, I spoke with my contact at NamokiMods and they were willing to send me another piece of sapphire crystal for free, so that was a load off. Of course, I was fully prepared to pay for one, since this was undoubtedly my blunder, whether it was an accident or not. Props to NamokiMods, they sent me another piece of crystal, so thank you, seriously, that was awesome. I also had an issue where the dial wasn't fitting quite as flat against the movement as other builds that I've done. I felt like the hands maybe could have been set just a little bit further down on the movement. I'm thinking maybe it was the adhesive strips that I used as dial dots. They weren't the same ones that I've used before, so maybe that was the issue, but there's no problems with the functionality of the watch. Since I put it together, it's working just fine, so hopefully that doesn't cause any issues in the future. They seem to be fitted on there quite nicely, and even after giving the watch a good shake, they don't fall off, so it seems fine anyway. And finally, about just the build in general, what do I think of it? You know, do I think it looks good? Yes. I think the 62 mass dial and hands go well with this style of case, and the Namoki's 62 mass hands are fantastic quality. Not only does the lume match the OEM SEIKO dial in any light you put it in, but it's nice and bright. It's on par with SEIKO's Lume Bright, so that's just a plus. Everything matches. Speaking of which, here's a lume shot. I think the lume pip is also doing a pretty good job at matching the rest of the watch, and it's not too bad in terms of brightness as well. I do love this bezel insert. I think the thick numbers and the steel really do set off the look of this watch. This was a specific thing that I wanted, this bezel, because it looks like the MM300 bezel, the steel version, and so I had to get my hands on one of those. My only disappointment is that I couldn't get hold of the original dial that I had planned for this build, the SKX007, which is the 2017 62 mass version that's designed for a chapter ring. Hence why NamokiMods sent over the Lumed Chapter Ring, and if I could have gotten hold of that dial, I would have been able to use that nice Lumed Chapter Ring. Anyway, in spite of the substitutions, I think this build turned out really well, and I'm just really pleased that I got to finally do a build in an MM300 case. So thanks again to NamokiMods for this collaboration. I can't thank you enough for sending these case parts to do this build, and the communication with you guys, whether or not it's been through email or the Namoki Discord server, has been top-notch. Any questions that I've had have been answered quickly and thoroughly, so you guys know who you are. Thank you for this collaboration. I really appreciate it, and it means that I can make more content for the viewers of this channel, so everybody wins. So before I go, as I said in the beginning, there are affiliate links to the NamokiMods parts that I used in this build down in the video description. So if you do end up buying anything from their store, if you do want to support the channel here, go ahead and use those affiliate links, and anything you buy from the store will just give me a little percentage of it at no extra cost to you. It just helps me out and helps out the channel. Anyway, I've waffled on enough about all this, haven't I? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.